Welcome to Spiritual Psychology. My name's Renee McKenna, and I bring my 30-plus years as a recovering addict and ex-crazy person turned therapist and shamanic healer to bring you snackable teachings on spirituality, psychology, and all things personal growth. And today I want to talk about reclaiming lost parts of ourself. And I have a client, Matthew, who was born with a life-threatening physical disability and had to have surgeries immediately after birth. And those surgeries continued one after another in early childhood. And I don't think he had his final surgery until he was a young adult. And surgery is frequently experienced by the body and the psyche as trauma, even if it's voluntary, necessary, and helpful. And particularly for an infant or a toddler, surgeries can be disconnecting, disorienting, and devastating. And this is under-recognized in our very physically oriented culture, where the healing of the body is considered primary and the mental, emotional, or spiritual implications are under-addressed or ignored completely. And physical healing without healing, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, is incomplete because our body-mind-spirit complex operates as an indivisible unit. Now, this doesn't mean we shouldn't do necessary surgery, but it does mean that we need to take into consideration the care for the soul or the whole person in the healing, recuperation, rehabilitation process. And Matthew's been struggling with drug and alcohol abuse, most recently with ketamine and psychedelics, on and off for most of his life. And although the ketamine infusions were intended to relieve his depression, and in the short run they seemed to do that, in the long run he became obsessed and addicted to the ketamine itself. And he was spending more and more time in what's known as a K-hole, because he was doing the medically induced infusions and then finding street ketamine and doing more until he was completely self-medicated. Now, I don't do or administer any mood or mind-altering substances, although certainly my spiritual psychology work runs parallel to many psychedelic practices. I personally believe that any place you can get with the drugs, you can get without them. But I'm not averse to psych meds, as they are a tool that's helpful for many people. Everybody's on their own path, and I have no idea what is best for other people. I barely know what's best for myself most of the time. But I will say my peripheral experience with ketamine, because I do have many people in my life in the psychedelic community and in the psychedelic recovery community, my personal experience through friends and clients of ketamine use has not been terribly effective in relieving depression. And I'm even aware of two people, both of whom were serving ketamine and other psychedelics to others, who separately and tragically took their own lives after starting to administer ketamine to themselves and moving into, I think, what I would call a ketamine-induced psychosis. So although it's a very hip drug right now, it's important to know that everything has a shadow, and for one reason or another, I've been getting a lot of back-end information about the really dark shadow side of ketamine. So like all things mood and mind-altering, psychedelics need to have a warning label. They certainly open the door for many people to have a transpersonal experience that may be life-changing. So ketamine's not really a psychedelic, although it's kind of in that basket right now. It's defined as a dissociative anesthetic. And if you know of anyone who has had a positive, transformative experience with ketamine induction, I would love to talk to them, just for my own continued research and information. So Matthew suffered tremendous early childhood trauma at the hands of very loving parents who wanted him to stay alive. At one point, at a year old, he was in a full body cast, strapped down, unable to move for 6 weeks. No one could pick him up or hold him, and although his parents sat with him every day, connecting and consoling him as best they could, that experience, although it saved his life, had a shattering effect on his internal world. And it wasn't the only one. Again, there were many surgeries after that. But that shattering of the self is very common in trauma. When there's an experience that's just too much to handle, process, or bear, parts of ourselves split off just to be able to survive. And the parts of us that find the experience, whatever it is, unbearable, either find a place in the transpersonal world to hide or get stuck in the traumatic experience. And they remain unintegrated, unhealed, and often frozen in historic and psychological time. And from my perspective, many of the presenting symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder or complex PTSD are these self parts trying to find comfort, connection, and reintegration. And the excellent news is that we can heal, help, and reconnect these parts of ourselves. And my spiritual psychology work is one of a range of cutting-edge technologies that make this inner healing possible. A lot of talk therapy is about understanding what happened to us in the past, which can be helpful, but it doesn't actually change anything. Using the inner journey work from my healing trauma course or from my Allies and Demons book and guided audio work, you can do this healing work within yourself. And we all have disparate self parts. It's part of the hero's journey of the soul path of a human life for most of us. But internal family systems, Hakomi, lifespan integration, inner child work all offer really grounded tools to be able to reintegrate the separated parts of ourselves that are what Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung called the unconscious that's often driving our life, screaming for attention. And there are ways to bring help and healing to ourselves on these deep levels now, besides just medicating them to shut them up. Medicating can work to shut them up, but quieting a child that's locked in the closet may make the house more peaceful, but there's still some serious suffering going on. And the inner work of healing is to open the closet door and bring these parts of ourselves into present time and to learn to love and heal them, nurture and support them in the way they've always needed. And because all parts of ourselves hold vital life energy, when we welcome these parts of ourselves back, even the most wounded ones, that wounding lives in the past. It's already happened. There may be emotions to process, but bringing those parts of ourselves present allows us to have access to what's good about us as well. In fact, often the parts of ourselves that separate off are the most intelligent, the most creative, the most sensitive in a good way, the most vulnerable. And they split off because those are the parts of us actually that most need protection. And soul energy is indestructible. And returning that soul energy back makes us more whole than we have ever been. And this is the work that Matthew and I have been doing, the work I've done with myself and the work I do with most of my clients. Healing on a soul level. And this is the hero's journey I referred to. And the hero's journey is this common mythical narrative that points to the central drama of a human life. And it can happen over and over again, that there is a call to change or to adventure. And then we often refuse the call, don't want to go there. We often meet a mentor or helper in person or through books or other information. We become willing to cross the threshold. And there are many personal growth challenges along the way. We gather allies, discover our enemies, internal and external. Often in the hero's journey, there's a dragon that has stolen the treasure and is hoarding it in a cave. And the hero or heroine must go into the cave, face the dragon, and retrieve the treasure. And that is a metaphor for this internal healing work. That the treasure could be understood as these separated parts of ourself, the jewels of our soul. And we need to go into the cave of our own psyche or unconscious, face the dragons or demons of our own fears and defensive structures, and bring these jewels of our most authentic self back for the benefit of ourself and the village in which we live. And for most of us, if we're willing to look inside, we'll find many voices in there that seem to be not our own. A wounded child, a victim, an inner critic, a saboteur. And we all have positive self-parts as well. Innocence, kindness, adventure, creativity, curiosity, humor. And the work, as my first Jungian therapist described, is to invite everybody to the table and let's have lunch. And Matthew's self-parts are very loud. And sometimes they shout at him, and sometimes they want him to use drugs. But he's been really developing this healthy center within himself, what they call in adult children of alcoholics, a healthy inner parent. And he's dedicated to bringing comfort and care to these now conscious parts of himself. So recently we did some work with a part of himself he calls the boy in the cave, part of himself deep in hiding, trying to stay safe. An aspect of himself that fled as a tiny child into a dark and quiet place inside. But he's terrified, completely distrusting, understandably, and doesn't believe the world is safe. But Matthew is also a deep connection with nature. He can feel the life energy of plants. He loves color and music, and through our inner journey work has made profound spiritual connections with the spirit of nature in the lower world, of unconditional love, compassion, and safety beyond his wildest dreams. And his primary spirit guide is Bear, and although I usually don't reveal spirit guides, it feels important to do this because Bear is a resource for many, including myself. And Bear has the ability to move between genders depending on the need, but probably leans more on the fierce mama bear side. And Matthew was brave enough to bring this wounded boy in the cave into the arms of Mama Bear. And the healing, transformation, and integration were immediate. That's not always the case, but this child part of himself became Bear, melted into Bear, and all that historic suffering fell away like old clothes. In shamanism, this is called soul retrieval. The first time I experienced it, it was spontaneous. I describe it in the introduction of my Allies and Demons book. So this isn't stuff I made up. It's a phenomenon of healing that's available to all of us. And it is the single most transformative piece of work that I have ever experienced or had the privilege to midwife. The sacred soul-level work of reconnecting with the jewels of our own authentic self. And I encourage you to look into the closet, the basement, or the cave where you have stored aspects of your own self. Parts that are hopeless, helpless, terrified. Parts frozen in grief or rage or victimization or shame. Bring them out of the darkness into the light. And if they need more help than you can offer, connect with God. And by God, I don't mean God. In whatever way feels most accessible to you, because divinity lives within us and is available to all of us for the help and the healing that we all need. Just like our body breathes itself, our heart beats, and our cells and systems know how to heal themselves, that healing is available emotionally, mentally, spiritually as well. And participating in that reclamation is the hero's journey of our own individual life. Thank you so much for listening. If you want help on your own hero's journey, shoot me an email, info@reneemckenna.com. We'll set up a free discovery call. I'm also offering single 40-minute sessions. If you want to dive in and just do some personal growth work, you can register for those on my website, reneemckenna.com. I'm kind of coasting in my life right now, instead of pedaling, waiting further instructions, seeing where the road will lead me. And thanks to all those who support this podcast and my work. Blessings on your path until we meet again. This is Renee McKenna for Spiritual Psychology.